All right, so, and these are in no particular order other than a piece of paper I have in my hand. So we have one relative to exemptions for vaccine mandates, and we have another one relative to exemptions from school vaccine mandates. We have, and a lot of these are duplicative, even though we tried to coordinate some of them. Prohibition of state and local enforcement of federal vaccine mandates, relative to medical mandates adopted by employers, relative to unemployment benefits for employees terminated for refusing to comply with the vaccine mandate, relative to vaccine mandates for government contractors, relative to students attending public schools that mandate the wearing of face masks without emergency orders in place, prohibiting higher education institutions receiving state funds for requiring face masks and COVID vaccinations for attendance, relative to school district policies on face masks in public schools, relative to requiring COVID vaccine for school attendance, prohibiting healthcare providers from refusing to provide care or services based on vaccine status, limiting the authority of the Department of Health and Human Services to mandate vaccinations and relative to the quarantine costs, prohibiting state and local governments from adopting certain mandates in response to COVID-19, and prohibiting employers in places of public accommodation from discriminating on the basis of vaccine status, relative to requiring insurance coverage for vaccinations, devices, and medical authorization for emergency use by the FDA, requiring clinical sites for post-secondary programs to accept exemptions for vaccine requirements for students, prohibiting higher education institutions receiving state funds requiring face masks and COVID vaccinations, relative to the definition of vaccination, relative to the equal access of places and public accommodations regardless of vaccine status, relative to unenforceability of non-compete agreements from termination of employees for non-compliance with vaccination mandates, prohibiting school districts from mandating COVID-19 vaccinations for school attendance, prohibiting certain employers from requiring COVID-19 vaccinations as a condition of employment, relative to the eligibility of workers' compensation for adverse reactions to a mandatory COVID vaccination, prohibiting minors over the age of 16 from obtaining vaccination without parental consent, prohibiting a parental parent's refusal to vaccinate a child pursuant to an order of state or federal government to be used as a basis of terminating parental rights, relative to vaccine status and wellness incentives. One more page. That's what we passed. Requiring the Hampshire Attorney General to impanel a COVID-19 grand jury to investigate events relative to the COVID-19 pandemic, relative to state grants for research and the effects of the human body of the COVID-19 vaccine, relative to employee protections from COVID-19 in the workplace, withdrawn, relative to limited liability for personal injury resulting from or related to the exposure to COVID-19, relative to financial responsibility for employer-mandated COVID-19 testing of employees, relative to COVID-19 health and safety policies at New Hampshire performing arts venues, requiring an independent audit and needs assessment regarding COVID-19 preparedness at long-term care facilities, nursing home, New Hampshire Veterans Home, and making